Welcome into Five Things. This is Erik McKinney, joined by Marc Kulkin and Greg Katz. Guys, we're talking USC's 35-31 loss to BYU, drops USC to 4-7 on the season, officially eliminates them from gaining bowl eligibility. They've got one more game at Cal. But before we move on to that, let's talk here. As always with Five Things, we're going to kick it off with our first thing, which is the player of the game. Greg, go ahead and go with your player of the game.
Well, there's a number of candidates. First of all, let me just congratulate USC's football team for coming to play. I thought in the second half they did a great job. My player of the game overall was actually Tyler Algier from BYU, because he had over 100 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. I haven't seen a power back like that at the college level since probably Mosi Tutupu of USC. I was absolutely impressed. And let me tell you, SC tattooed him left and right. He took some big shots, which was a credit to our defense. I think they came to hit. But he was really a difference maker. He would get them first downs when they needed. Although let me just say that I was impressed with Jackson Dart. He got better as the game got going. I think, a lot of promise for him. And also a little shout out to Vavae. I thought he was just wonderful in there. But I'll have some further thoughts down the road. But those are kind of what stuck out to me.
Okay, great. So Mark, Greg went with the entire USC team, the BYU running back, the USC running back, and the USC quarterback. So if there's anybody left, go ahead and give us your player of the game.
It's inflation. We're under an inflation situation.
Let's just start separating the wheat from the chaff. So let's just get Vavae, and I'm going to put him up, give him one more vote. I think for Vavae to come out on senior night and get that opportunity that was kind of taken away from him earlier in the season, and to perform the way he did was special. And Erik, you were there after the game in the press conference. It got emotional as well when that question was asked of Vavae, what it felt like, to get this opportunity after, being replaced on the depth chart, so to speak. And it got emotional. He had to kind of gather himself a little bit. And there were a lot of onions in the room, because it wasn't just Vavae who felt it. Dante got emotional. I found myself getting a little emotional. We have to remind ourselves that these are, I like to refer to them as young men, but some of them are still kids. And it is a game. And, for everything that these guys have been through, I think it's all starting to come to a head, that they realize that, their time's up. So to see Vavae go out strong, even in a loss, he's my player of the game.
Yeah, I'm going to back that up. You got to go with him. It was senior night, and it's been an interesting year. When the captains were selected at the beginning of the season, the thought was, there was a lot of talk. Keaton Slovis is not one, but the guys that got picked, those are leaders. And then you look around and you're thinking Ben Griffiths is the only starter at this point of your 4 captains. When Drake London goes down and Vi kind of gets bumped by Keontae, and Isaiah Polomau is getting bumped by Kalen Bullock a little bit there. So to see Vi come back, scores a touchdown against UCLA, and then wanted to get him another yard, but 99 yards rushing, a touchdown against BYU, and just running really hard. If you could have maybe a do-over for him, that third down right there at the end, to be able to kind of cut a little bit without the stumble and get upfield a little bit. But you have to love kind of the energy that he brought, and just kind of being able to take his turn and sit for a while and then come back and be ready to go when his number was called. He's one of those guys that was easy to root for his entire career here, will be easy to root for wherever he ends up and whatever he ends up doing in football or outside of it. So again, another game, but on senior night, Vi was fun to watch. And Greg, I'm gonna echo you here. Jackson Dart, that's a good veteran BYU team that gave a true freshman USC quarterback 2 years ago a lot of trouble in that offense. And USC scored a few points in that game, but picked Keaton Slovis off 3 times and once in overtime. And Jackson Dart looked in control for a lot of it. There were some kind of scramble plays and where he let his athleticism sort of take over, but a good showing from him there. We're going to go to our second thing, and Mark, we'll start with you here, and that's the play of the game. Go ahead with yours.
Yeah, I want to go back to USC's defense had actually kind of risen to the occasion, forcing BYU into a field goal. And unfortunately, there was an offsides call. BYU took their own points off the board, and one play later, they put a touchdown up on the board. Now, it really didn't have an impact on the game because USC eventually came back and took the lead again. However, it was that type of, I don't know, maybe aggressive approach that BYU just stuck with it throughout the game from beginning to end. I mean, they were calling timeouts at the end of the game when they didn't need to. So it was just a continuation of seeing how another team approaches the game. And that caught my attention. Again, it was like, hey, rarely do you see a team take points off the board because they still had a 4th down in front of them. But they took the gamble, they risked, and they scored a touchdown.
And that's 4 points. Four points wing and a 4-point.
What is the difference? And so maybe it was the difference in the game. I take it back.
And that's the second time this year that USC jumps offside on a field goal. The team takes points off the board and scores a touchdown on the next play. Stanford did it earlier against USC. Greg, go ahead. Your play of the game from this one.
Well, it was so much of a reminder of what happened the week before against UCLA. Trojans got right there into it, and here comes a 100-yard kickoff return. It's like it just melted. Everything changed. And I felt that in the fourth quarter when Algiers fumbled, the ball was picked up by Dallin Holker and went even further upfield, getting close to the end zone. Of course, they score the touchdown by the young kid who hardly ever plays at all. And I felt that was just a game changer. It put pressure. A lot of it's on pressure and in close games. And I just said, you know what? Sometimes they say good teams win close games and not so good teams lose close games. It just seems like even when they're trying so hard and they're really into it and they're really competing, that was the type of play that, it was just fate. And that's all it was. Somebody picked up the ball. I saw it different angles and it just happened. That was my play of the game.
Yeah, that's I think an 8-yard run that turns into a 30-yard gain once the fumble gets added in. And that drive is 6 plays, 62 yards, all of it on the ground. And that was a huge touchdown. And that we talked a little bit before jumping on and doing this, that was the play that stuck out to me too. But I'll go with the one that kind of decided it. And that's the 4th down throw. Jackson Dart to Gary Bryan. And you need 6 yards. And you get a 5-yard completion. And it's one of those things where you understand that not every route is going to be run perfectly. There's a defense there that's shoving and bumping, and you can only take so much. But boy, that's one of those that's tough. And I know Gary Bryan is going to say, boy, I'd love to have another shot at that. Would love to be able to get those, because they ran kind of a similar thing for a touchdown earlier, 10-yard touchdown. But this time, BYU's ready for it and can't quite get there. And it felt like Jackson Dart was going to be able to do it, was going to be able to lead that drive and get that touchdown. So for me, that's kind of the play, because at that point it's over. That's the play that ends the game. And that's, again, if you're looking at USC's season, that's the season. It's coming up a little bit short, and it was just, it felt disappointing but fitting kind of for what we've seen out of USC this year.
I felt, Erik, if I could just add on that, that's a freshman mistake that you don't know where the first down marker is, to be honest with you. I just looked at it and I just said, he wasn't even close to it. It's not one of those things where you keep measuring it and you keep looking at it. I mean, he was a full yard. It was no question about it. But that one is he's going to think about this one for a long time. It probably will never happen again.
And a big physical Drake London in that situation, he gets 8 yards, he gets 9 yards, right? You're able to do that, and I think that's one of the things we talked about. Players of the game earlier, and USC is playing this game without Keontae Ingram, without Drake London, without Keaton Slovis, with a banged up and trying to get out there Drake Jackson. If you had said at the beginning of the season, hey, you got to go play BYU without those guys, that would not have been a winning proposition. So, Greg, you mentioned it, and I'm going to get to it a little bit later, but the way USC showed up in this game, especially kind of what you expected based on what we'd seen against Arizona State, what we'd seen against UCLA, and we're going to hit on expectation right now. The expected, anticipated thing that delivered. Greg, we'll start with you on that one, our third thing.
Well, I expected that Algiers would give them all sorts of problems. The week before, Charbonnet did the same thing. And I think this guy might even be better, but they're a different type of running back. But it was like you knew that if this guy started getting off, eventually tackles would be missed and so on and so forth. But again, I usually I'm pretty objective with these things. But I give SC's defense credit in one area. They never stopped attacking him. That guy's a load. He is a man's man, an NFL fullback. So I expected them to have problems with him. They did have problems with him, but they never stopped trying to. Let me tell you something. He'll be very sore on that plane ride home. That I can guarantee you.
Yeah, Mark, go ahead with yours.
I don't know what to anticipate out of this team anymore. So, I anticipated BYU actually winning by more than 4 points. So I guess there's a positive takeaway out of that USC overachieved. That's the only thing I can really offer. Because Greg touched on it. We all anticipated BYU running the ball. They did. We anticipated them being able to throw the ball. They did. We anticipated the result. It was just a little bit better than we probably thought it was going to be.
Yeah, and I'm going to steal yours, and I'm going to move into the fourth thing right there. I expected BYU to be able to run it, and they ran it pretty well, 189 yards on the ground, and they threw it when they needed to. Also, 276 through the air and 2 touchdowns, a long one that you had USC safeties not able to make the play on a couple of those, and those were all anticipated. But as we go into our fourth thing, and I'm going to kick it off, the surprise, USC showed up. They showed up with energy. They showed up and they played, and you got that kind of initial burst and then the fade, and you thought, okay, well, this is the team. It resembles kind of the fan support that showed up for this game, which was, it sounded like a BYU home game the entire time. The time the teams came out onto the field to the time the game ended as BYU is kneeling it down. It being here in the Coliseum and hearing the crowd do that for an away team, it felt like sound was being piped in, was kind of the feeling that you had on that. But again, USC shows up, played hard on senior night, and played for 4 quarters, gave himself a chance to win. This was the first time they had a lead in the second quarter, or in the second half this month. Arizona State never got ahead in the second half. UCLA never got ahead in the second half for USC. So again, my surprise, the fourth thing here for us is that USC really showed up and really put a lot of effort into this thing. I know there's going to be people that are like, you're pleased that they showed up in a 4-point loss to a BYU team that USC probably should, beat or play with, or, that should be expected. But based on what we'd seen and what could have happened after that UCLA game with just everybody kind of going in the tank, that was a surprise. And I thought a nice one for the program and the players and kind of everybody involved. And so now that I jumped on that, we'll go ahead, Greg, your fourth thing, your surprise.
Well, this is actually one of my more favorite surprises of our series of surprises over these several weeks. And I was surprised, but I was angry at the same time. The offensive line was really good. It was really physical. It did not look like the air raid offensive line that we have seen for 2 years, 3 years. This was an offensive line that was big. And I just may go back to Dante. I don't know. They were running the ball like a USC football team. Okay. Which tells me that this air raid thing has been a fiasco at the highest level. These players, I don't believe that players overachieve. If you can't overachieve unless you have that ability to begin with. Okay. But what really got to me is the continuing pounding against BYU, the excitement that they weren't going to be that. Were they going to be the hammer or were they going to be the nail? They were the hammer. And I don't know what it was with Graham Harrell. Maybe he learned more than any of the people on that field how important running the football is and running it. That made every USC, I'm sure, fan, and I can tell you right now, every football coach that's watched it probably was going, this was like a kind of like look behind the curtain. Maybe they weren't that bad a group. It was a bad fit scheme for this group. I don't think it was a fluke because I think BYU's got a pretty decent defense and they're pretty physical. And, I was watching, Didich as an example. Now, here's a guy that's 6'2", about 280, 290. And he's going after people. I mean, he's eating people up. You don't see that if he's pass protecting 90% of the time. I don't care if it's the NFL. Very rarely can you just keep passing like that and be effective. But my hat's off to this offensive line. I've been as critical as anybody else. And my hat's off to the coach. Clay did a great job with them. Not the Clay in Georgia, I might add. But what a great uplifting feeling I felt, even in a loss, that, look, you know what? You allowed these guys to be the attacker. And they attacked. And I will tell you, Brigham Young knew it. And, that last play, I think you guys mentioned it, Malapei, he slipped. I didn't think he slipped personally. I think he couldn't cut back fast enough. There was just a brief hole. It would have been, it'd have to be a Reggie Bush type of cut to go back into that hole, in my opinion. But surprise, I was surprised they blocked as well as they did. They were as physical as they were. But maybe I shouldn't have been surprised because I can't stand the air raid, if you didn't know already. And it will be great when the new coach comes and puts in a physical running attack, because you know what? Maybe we found something, or at least something was revealed to all of us that some of us already knew. So sorry for the rant.
No, yeah, USC 44 carries, 210 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 44 attempts on the ground, 35 passes tonight. And Dart had a few where maybe he scrambles where it's best called, but still that's a shift that we've seen that number of runs called and that kind of success on the ground, almost 5 yards a carry for USC as a team. Mark, go ahead. You're surprised from this one.
Yeah, I think Greg teed it up, but I'll avoid giving the Graham Harrell response of 1,000 words. They use the run game. Greg, it's a joke.
Mark, you don't see me grabbing a tomato to throw at you, do you?
I am just so over with Graham Harrell's 1,000-word essay answers that just go on and on and on and on. So,
are you the type of guy that counted how many times he says
Yes, I have. So, but you teed it up. The running game. I was surprised of how well they stuck with it, because it was almost like they were trying to control the clock by not allowing BYU to have the ball as often, which obviously prevents them from being able to score as often as they probably could have. And then incorporating the tight end more and more as the season went on. I mean, Lake McCree today was the team's leading receiver. And whether that was by design or it just, happened organically during the game because, Jackson kept finding him wide open down the seam. The tight end has been wide open down the seam all year. So the fact that they found it, they used it, and it almost worked to a positive result this game. Yeah, that was my surprise. It took forever. Game 11.
Yeah. Let's go to fifth thing, and that's going to be biggest takeaway. Greg, we'll go back to you. Your biggest takeaway from this one, the final home game of the season for USC.
Well, it's a home season to forget. There's no doubt about it. In fact, my column on Sunday, just a little sneak preview, is the biggest. Who I felt sorry for the most was the grand old lady, the Coliseum, that had to sit there and, figuratively just put its head down and just watch this mess happen. But my biggest takeaway was adding onto my rant from before, just how much a scheme can make a difference in a football team, how much having players, you guys kind of got to me when you mentioned Vavai Malapai in the press conference, and, onions everywhere, people were tearing up. Really, he was so misused in his career. Had he come along at the Pete Carroll era, he would have been a Stanley Havili. He would have been a guy that would come out, could do everything as a fullback, block, catch, run. And he's not the only player I feel that's been misused dramatically on this team. But again, coming away with it, and I'll cut this short, when you do something that doesn't fit the players, you hide their potential, which is unproven talent. That's what potential really is. And I just feel that, I just wish when I see Vavai and some of the others that they would have had an opportunity to play in a different scheme where you would have two backs in there and he doesn't have to sit while, Ingram comes back. And let me ask you guys a question since we're on it. Ingram came out and I watched it, the senior recognition. Are we to believe that he has not any chance he's coming back next year if he went through the Heritage Tunnel?
Some of those guys could come back. This is Ingram's fourth year. And so the COVID year allows people to be able to play that extra year, guys who don't already, haven't already used their sixth year this year. So there's still guys who came out who will have a decision to make whether or not to come back. I don't think these were all declarations. I would anticipate a big chunk of the guys that came out of that tunnel not to be back with USC next season. Greg, Mark, we'll jump to you. Your biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I think it's just the finality of the home season. We're talking about the emotions of everything. You saw players that were taking their time leaving the field after the game. Josh, one of our, on the On3 site, he was telling me in the press box, he wants to stay up there as long as he can because this is his final game as a student. So the season's coming to an end. Clay Helton was fired. The season continued to get worse and worse and worse as far as, wins and losses. I think the final takeaway is there's just one more game. And you're just hoping that they show up in Berkeley next week with the same energy that they showed up with today. Because knowing that they will not be going to a bowl game, you're kind of concerned, did they leave it out on the field tonight? So I guess that's my takeaway.
All right. So mine is, instead of focusing on kind of this one and this season, I'm ready for the new book. And no disrespect to the seniors, and I think we talked about a lot of those guys and kind of what they've given and all that. Jackson Dart, Lake McCree, Michael Jackson III, Darwin Barlow, another young guy, Kalen Bullock, Xavier Alford. There are some young guys that, as this season progressed, did more and more and more. And you've got so many questions about next season. Who's the coach? What kind of scheme? Who's coming back? What's the roster makeup? All of that. If they can find a way to kind of smoothly transition into next year and keep these young guys together and involved and on the roster and fit them in here, boy, there are some guys that it is going to be really fun to look forward to playing in 2022 and getting these guys back. I didn't mention defensive lineman or offensive lineman in that. And obviously that's going to be those are going to be discussions that you need to have and figure out. But boy, we saw flashes in this game and the last few. A lot of young guys there, and that's kind of my takeaway from this one and a couple other ones. So I think some questions to answer there, but also some things very much to look forward to. But for this one, this is going to be our last wrap from the Coliseum as USC drops another home game. This one 35-31 as BYU comes out on top. So for that, I was going to wrap up our 5 things look. For Marc Kulkin, for Greg Katz, this is Erik McKinney. Thanks for listening to. Thanks for watching. WeAreSC.